Good morning. It's good to see y'all. As our season of Easter continues and goes on, we are beginning to encounter a shift in the tone of our readings, and it kind of goes like this. This week we have yet again a retrospective of sorts, a taking of a story that precedes even the crucifixion of Jesus and pulling it forward into the season of Easter as if it's some kind of flashback so that we can take another look at it and get some new meaning perhaps. The general theme of the upcoming Sundays as it starts to pull some of this material is this, that Jesus is on his way back to the place that God dwells, or the realm in which God dwells anyway, but will leave his Spirit here to continue his work in the life of the church. In other words, ascension and a Pentecost, they're right on the horizon. You can dust off your camping chairs and get ready for our Pentecost picnic. It's just a couple weeks away. I know you're excited. All these themes start to shift, and they go back to the language that Jesus used with his disciples to help understand, or help us understand anyway, how he said this was going to unfold so that the church could become what the church was called to be. Like Psalm 23 last week, we have another reading today that most of us encounter most of the time in something like a funeral service. But in the light of Easter, it's really a call for us to become the church that we are called to be. It's a promise for now, not just a language for us to hold on to until we are on our deathbed. Now, it is comforting, and I'm not trying to take that away, that Jesus has gone ahead of us to prepare a place for us in his Father's house, in which there are many rooms, enough rooms for you and for me. That's good news. That you can abide with God there with an intimate relationship is great news. None of this is to diminish that. But there is something else to take comfort from here that propels the church forward. One place for us to go is actually the very line that causes a lot of us to pause when we read this text from John chapter 14. When Thomas asks for some directions for how to get to the place that Jesus is going, and he says, look, I don't even know where you're going, much less how to get there. And Jesus says, you do too know the way. I am the way and the truth and the life. And then he says, no one comes to the Father but by me. I actually draw a lot of comfort from those lines, and not for the reason that you might assume. Most of us hear that verse as it has been told us. A poor but common reading about that text is that Jesus intends some kinds of exclusivity, right? Nobody's going to get there unless you come through me, so all those people who don't go through me, bad news for you. That might not be exactly what he means here. You can fit that within some kind of other theological context about sin and redemption. There's a framework for understanding that, but it doesn't seem like a very likely reading. Our scene is at the Last Supper. John 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. This is all Last Supper material. To a set of disciples with troubled hearts who are already probably grieving the events of the night that is about to occur, where Jesus will be arrested and handed over the next day when he'll be crucified, who know that everything under their feet is changing and not all of it seems so good. Jesus offers tenderness and compassion and hope in the place of their fear. Seems like an awfully strange place for him to also say, and by the way, there are a whole lot of people out there who might go to hell. That's not really what he's getting at. But offering hope in the place of fear very much is what he is getting at. And the focus then and the great comfort is this: if you know me, or since you know me, you already have all of the teaching, the way, all of the truth, all of the life that you will ever need to have the kind of intimate relationship with me and with my Father that you desire. You don't need anything else. This is enough. Now, I, for one, will never tire of hearing those kinds of reminders from Jesus, and he offers it all the time. I don't need anything more to have enough if I have this relationship, this intimate relationship with God. I don't need the next self-help book. I don't need the great next, fad diet. I don't need snazzier clothes or shoes. None of this is essential. What's truly essential is this abiding, loving relationship with God. James Finley, who's a clinical psychologist and a contemplative author, writes that which is essential, which is truly essential, never imposes itself. Love, which is essential, is always offered. It's invitational. It's never imposed, but that which is unessential is constantly imposing itself. Think of the things that are imposing themselves onto these disciples, the troubles that are stirring in their heart, and the ones that they can anticipate, the ones that would be experienced by the first people to ever hear these gospel stories. Trouble will impose itself. The disciples know it, and you know it too, and we don't need a lot of reminders. Jesus will be crucified. They will be kicked out of their synagogues and lose families and friends over the decision to follow Jesus. There will be martyrdom like Stephen, and there will be violence. There will be disease and famine. There will be war. There will be terrorism. There will be mass shootings. There will be bad diagnoses, and so on and so forth. This world has its troubles, and they impose themselves on us all the time. But as an alternative of sorts, Jesus offers the invitation of an intimate, loving relationship that is beyond that trouble and is more than enough, and from which the church will take its shape and its purpose, its direction, its very meaning. The focus then of the teaching of Jesus isn't about how someone gets to heaven at all, or how other people will fail to make it there. It's instead about moving from a place where our hearts are troubled to a place where we have the peace that he is inviting us to, and from that peace where we begin to operate and do the works that he has prepared the church to do, continuing in the ever greater works that will be empowered by his very Spirit. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, whom you know completely in me, and that is enough even for the trouble that is coming. Because you trust and know and have peace, you can participate in those ever greater works. This week I had the honor to attend a clergy gathering for continuing ed. And sometimes these are great, and sometimes they're really boring. And I thought this was going to be one of those really boring ones. It was about the Cappadocian Fathers, a set of 4th century bishops from modern day Turkey. I know some of you, I can see in your faces already that you are thinking, I'm going to talk a lot about the Cappadocian Fathers, and you are about to be bored, as I thought I was going to be bored. I will spare you most of the details. None of them were boring. It was fantastic. It's Professor Gabby Thomas, who's also a priest in the Church of England and teaches church history there at Candler. So her focus was on these Cappadocian Fathers, this trio of bishops, and she really made it practical for us. Thanks be to God, because otherwise I was catching up on my email. One of the things that she said that so surprised me, and I'm so glad I heard, was that the first thing that can truly be called a hospital in the world, was developed by one of these Cappadocian Fathers, Basil the Great. In all my years of church history and seminary, I did not hear that. Basil the Great, there in the midst of the 4th century, responded to a world that was hurting. There were all sorts of troubles. There was famine and severe poverty, disease was rampant, leprosy was still an incredible cause for concern, so much so that people were still cast off and sent out of society. And she showed us art in which lepers were being burned alive in a crowd because the city just didn't know how to handle this epidemic of sorts. Well, there were some institutions in the world that tried to care for the poor or for the sick in their own ways. It was under the leadership of Basil that we first have the thing that we might call a hospital. It's called the Basiliad. It would take on the cause of rehabilitating the lives of the poor by not only caring for their immediate needs, but also teaching them and helping them to do sort of job training, you might say. But that wasn't enough. Looking at a collection of people that was facing disease, it brought in what we might call medical professionals to be agents of healing in their midst. And a society was built around caring for them. And even that, there are things in the Roman world that would have mimicked that, but what they did not do was provide that same kind of care for those who were terminally ill. You might say that the first sort of hospice care was offered in the Basiliad. It would take on those patients as well. Many people didn't like this idea. The idea that somehow the church would go about caring for these people that they really didn't want in their town anyway. That not in my backyard, NIMBY kind of attitude was as prevalent then as it is now. But Basil, well, he persisted. And he persisted due to his deep convictions. One, that every human being was an image bearer of God, created in God's image to carry that image and likeness in this world. And so all of them, every one of us, deserving of honor and dignity and respect and care, love. And then two, that he had everything that he needed in his intimate relationship with Christ. There's nothing to lose. He might risk his political esteem and he might lose it, and that would be okay. He might lose his own well-being or his financial welfare. Okay. He's got everything he needs. And all of those things are of less value than these image bearers of God. So the city won. They said, you can't build your hospital here inside these walls. And he said, all right, I'll build it right outside these walls. No big deal. And as the empire eventually became Christian later in the 4th century, all sorts of hospitals just like it sprung up all over the empire, all over the Roman Empire. Because of the boldness and the conviction of Basil, who would not let his heart be troubled, but instead would face those troubles with hope instead of fear, a decidedly Christian institution called a hospital system was created. If his hope had merely been for an afterlife in which he as an individual would have been with God, Basil would have never dared to do something so amazing. But because his hope instead was rooted in offering ministry in a world that might make this world better reflect God's love than the one he was living in currently, he persisted. It strikes me that in every place where Christianity is offered, invited people to the healing power of love rather than impose its will on others, we are not only consonant with Jesus and his teaching, but we are operating from a place of hope instead of fear. And from that hope, we move with boldness. To read John chapter 14 or anywhere else in the life of Jesus that Jesus' hope is to circumscribe or somehow limit the offering and gift of salvation is to operate from a place of fear that desires Christian dominion over this world and doesn't have much to do with what Jesus was trying to teach us about, but to look at these invitations to peace and incorporate them into our lives provides us an opportunity participate in those ever greater works, to do that loving ministry. And the world around us needs this so badly. The very end of the section that we are reading in, as that supper that he was sharing with his disciples on the night that he was to die, or to be arrested anyway, as that came to its conclusion, he said, "I want you to have peace in me." This is the 16th chapter of the Gospel of John. Recognizing their troubled hearts, he offered, "In this world you will have much trouble." Most of you can probably finish the line. But take heart, for I have overcome the world. Take heart. Take heart, O people of God. There's a whole lot of trouble out there. Of course there is. It was promised that there would be. But you have more than enough within you because of the love that you share, abiding in and rooted in Christ, to offer up hope. To offer up hope in a place of trouble. Do you have trouble? Do you know people who do? I know that between those two, the answer is yes, somewhere in there. And really, just like Basil, can you look around at the world around you and see that there are hurting people? There's a hurting creation. It's in need of a new kind of hospital. It's in need of a church that with boldness and conviction, without fear, filled with hope and peace instead, offers loving ministry. Take heart, church. And as you take heart, continue in those ever greater works. Do it from a place of love, a place of peace, a spirit of hope, and therefore do it all in the name of Christ. Amen.